I'm here with Tom Blyth and Donald DeLine of Billy the Kid on MGM Plus. I'm super happy to talk to you guys today at ATX. This show, it's such an odd duck, I think, in that there hasn't been like this huge demand for westerns in the last 70 years. And then I think Yellowstone comes along and people are reminded that guys on horses with living by a code is something that they like to watch. But what were your challenges with getting this off the ground and running?
Really, it was something interesting because Michael Wright, who runs MGM Plus, is a huge Western fan and Billy the Kid fan. And when Michael Hurst let him know that he had this kind of long fascination with Billy the Kid, and that was a relationship, the two guys were looking for something to do together, it really happened pretty quickly. So it wasn't really a struggle much at all. And it was pre the big success of Yellowstone when it all started.
Okay. Well, that's really cool. I mean, when you look at, I've seen a couple Westerns that have come out since, like say 1883, which is Yellowstone prequel, but there's something about that sort of gritty shittiness of the West that if you don't do it right, comes off looking cheap. Yeah. And your show never looks cheap.
Oh, good.
Oh, thank you for that.
That's always good. As a bare minimum, that's a nice place to start.
We can only go up.
We have several locations. You go to Coffeyville, for instance, which is nothing, but it's convincingly nothing.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah. We built that whole whole town on location.
In the Badlands.
Coffeyville. Yeah, it was it was like the moon, being out on the moon in that
amazing
territory. Yeah.
It could be anywhere. I mean, it felt like Arizona, even though we're way further north. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looked terrible.
It was grim.
Yeah.
It was grim. It was grim and muddy.
But yeah, to your point, I think something that was really cool about being on the show is that it always feels super authentic, super visceral. Everything is shot on location. So season 2, part 2, which is coming out on Sunday, is all in the snow because it takes place 4 months afterwards.
Right.
Where we left off in part 1. And
thanks to the actor strike.
Yeah. So circumstantially, we ended up shooting in like minus 40-degree weather. And it just adds a whole level. I don't think any of us could have guessed how much cooler it would make the show.
Yeah, it became a big character.
Yeah. And then we get to see cowboys wrapped up in like furs and like heavy leathers, and it just like it forced us to kind of get creative and imagine what it would have been like, because we think of cowboys as being like in this arid desert environment, but there were guys living through snowstorms, and they didn't have central heating, they didn't have
they didn't have down jackets.
Nope. There was no North Face.
Nope.
And so it's cool to see them surviving in this like other world that they would have had to live in.
So Tom, in the first season, when you blew the head off that snake, that was when I knew that moment, because the stepfather's right there. You'd been practicing with the pistol, but not really showing anybody your skills. So, but at that moment, I knew we had sort of a different Billy than we had seen elsewhere cinematically. Were you already familiar with any on-screen Billies? And have you seen a movie called Old Henry?
You know what? So, funnily enough, I've actually managed to pretty much go my whole life without seeing any other Billy stories. So I've had never seen Young Guns. Even though I loved westerns growing up, I just somehow avoided Young Guns.
Where'd you grow up, Tom?
I grew up in the north of England, in
go.
Yorkshire. I was a big fan of like
Yorkshire cowboys?
Stories. There are Yorkshire farmers. I don't think there's plenty of Yorkshire farmers. And I lived in the country, but I used to have like a wooden horse and a fake gun and a cowboy hat. I used to like go out in the fields of England playing cowboy. So this was like a dream come true. But I had somehow managed to avoid like Emilio Estevez's version. Who else has played him? Oh my God, everyone. But all the other versions, Left-Handed Gun, Paul Newman, so many of like my acting heroes played Billy before me, and I haven't seen any of them, which I'm like, that was kind of just a bit of good luck, because you never want to see other iterations that you would risk copying by accident, or kind of, we wanted to build this from the ground up and make it our own, and make him kind of a real stoic hero. But I have seen Old Henry. I watched that last year, and because I didn't know the twist at the end, I just thought it was a Western. Have you seen Old Henry?
I've never seen
It's
it.
Tim Blake Nelson, who is just phenomenal.
I better see
and
it.
he played it.
Yeah.
You would love it. It's
Okay,
so good. And it's short and sweet. It's just such a good story. And there's a big twist that relates to our show.
Oh, nice.
That's why
I
we're
can't
talking
wait.
about it. But,
Can't wait.
But yeah, I have seen it. I love it. Tim Blake Nelson's a legend and a fellow Juilliard graduate. He went to the same school.
Well, all the best actors come out of Juilliard, we know.
That movie came out of nowhere, but it does. Yeah, it's a great little Western. Just
Oh,
cool.
nice.
Yeah.
It's cool.
As we mentioned, we do have these other cinematic Billies that have you haven't seen, Tom. So I'll just tell you that they are generally more wild, more reckless, more devil may care. But your Billy has like this internal sense of morality, and when he confronts something that will do him or those he cares harm, he makes a tough decision, and he has to go that way. But he's not like a sociopath about it.
No,
he just has a code. So, how did you decide to break from that kind of cinematic tradition? And since this is historical fiction, not a documentary.
That's right.
Exactly.
So is there enough, I don't know, documentation of Billy to kind of support, well, this is a valid version of Billy?
There is actually, because when I first came in to season 1, Otto Bathurst, who got the season started off, the first 2 episodes, he led those. I came in with a more wily, kind of wild, off-the-cuff Billy when we were rehearsing, and he was like, cool, I like that. Now let's try it if he's kind of stoic and more watchful and more curious and
internal in a
has
sense.
more internal, has more of like an internal moral code. And I was like, oh man, everything I've read is kind of like he's got a craziness to him. And then once we did that, we were like, oh, this is cool. This is something different. He's more of like like you say, he's got a moral code that he lives by. But it also gives us somewhere to go. So season 2, especially this part 2 coming out, you get to see him start to go a little more feral, a little more wild. So he's moving away.
He's famous.
He's starting to know that he's like okay, cool, I can get away with being that guy if I need to be. And I think the epitome of that is the fight at the beginning of episode 5, which is our first part of first episode of part 2 coming out. When Buckshot Roberts comes hunting him down, and you see Billy kind of like, you see the old Billy kind of trying to control the outcome and be somewhat sophisticated, and then you see him lose it. Yeah. And when he loses it, it gets a little scary, which is cool. It's cool that you get to see. We've got somewhere to go with him. There's somewhere to there's a new Billy on the horizon, which we're starting to see.
When you look into Billy's future, there's got to be some sort of climax with Jesse. We know factually there's got to be a climax with Pat, but I know you can't tell me. But can you give me any words to raise viewers' expectations?
What do you think?
What are you thinking?
Honestly, I actually don't know, because Michael Hurst is really good, and he did this with Vikings. He did it with Elizabeth. Like, he's a legend at historical fiction, like in the industry, one of the best.
He writes every single episode of the show by himself. We don't have any other writers.
So all we can do...
It's very unusual.
It's very unusual and very cool, because he's very collaborative as well. Yes. But I will say, I know Michael thinks of this as historical fiction, and because of that, he's excited about telling a version of events that maybe we don't read in the history books. He's excited about about playing with the different versions of events that people think happened and crossing them over and using imagination to say, like, we actually don't know everything that happened to Billy. Let's use this as like an experiment to see what could have happened.
Yes, exactly. I think he loves unpredictable, complicated characters, which we were talking about earlier. And he always kind of keeps you on your toes in that regard. And there's enough history that was recorded, but a lot of it's murky, and there's conflicting accounts of things. So he always stays true to the character first and foremost, rather than what might be conflicting factual evidence. So he'll go from a psychological perspective of what does he really believe in his heart that character would have chosen to do, which I think makes it really interesting always.
And a valid approach.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I think that's my one question.
This was great. Thank you for the questions.